The pictures of me at Kansas City where I was with my cousin. Again, it was a Chiefs game. I am a Raiders fan, and I'm going to tell you that was one of the times that it was not fun to be a fan. He told me before I came there, he said, do not wear Raider colors. Your life will be in jeopardy. And I thought he was joking, but he really wasn't. They're very serious about their football, and so we're there, and we're in the parking lot, and I'm eating a hot dog and drinking a Mountain Dew at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I noticed that a lot of vehicles around us in the parking lot, they even had either like big screen TVs outside them or inside them, and I was asking about that, and he said, a lot of these people in the parking lot here don't even have tickets. They don't even go into the game. They just come and they park and they have their fun and they watch the game outside the stadium and don't even go in. And I thought, how interesting for people to be that kind of a fan. And as we look at this in Scripture and we look at Jesus' ministry, I think that what you will see is that there were a lot of tailgaters in Jesus' ministry. There were a lot of people that were part of the crowd that followed him from place to place. They followed him wherever he went. In fact, there is even one story where Jesus is teaching them, and then he got in a boat to go to the other side of the lake. And when he got to the other side, the people had traveled around the side of the lake, and they were waiting for him on the other side, and they followed him wherever he went. They had their ticket in one hand, and they had their popcorn and candy and soda in the other hand, and they were ready for the next show. And everywhere he went, they were there waiting. And now Jesus never minded the crowds. He always welcomed them. But when you read through the Gospels, you realize that there comes this point in Jesus' ministry where he wants to put the crowd at a crossroad, where he wants those that are part of the crowd to come to this crossroads in their life where they either truly follow him or they just go home. They decide if they're going to really follow him and if they're there for him or if they're there just for the show and the miracles. Luke chapter 14 reveals one of these moments where Jesus is with the crowds and he really wants them to have this moment of decision in their lives and this moment of evaluation. Last week, remember, we talked about to decide whether you are a fan or a follower. One of the things that you have to ask yourself, one thing you have to do is you have to have that DTR. Does anybody remember what DTR stands for? Okay, define the relationship. That's what it is. And so here in Luke chapter 14, Jesus is wanting to have one of these moments with the people in the crowd and have them ask themselves, what is my relationship with Jesus about? Why am I here? What does it all mean? Luke chapter 14, starting in verse 25, and it says there, large crowds were traveling with Jesus. Turning to them, he said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and children, his brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Now you think about that statement that Jesus makes. Those are not really words that are going to continue to draw a huge crowd and that are going to go over well with the crowd. I mean, we would think that maybe Jesus would say something more along the lines of, come one, come all, to the greatest show on earth, bring a friend and get a toaster. There's going to be miracles and free food and great stories, and we'll all make s'mores and sing Kumbaya, and that's a great time, and that would draw crowds. Telling people, listen, if anyone is going to come after me, he has to hate his father and mother, his wife, his children, his brothers and sisters, or he can't follow me. That doesn't draw crowds. That turns people off. And yet that's exactly what he says. That if you're going to be my disciple, you have to hate your family, your parents, your spouse, your children, even yourself. And so we got to look at this and we got to think, what in the world is Jesus talking about here? Why would he make such a statement? What does he mean? Well, folks, let me just say at the outset, obviously Jesus is not talking about hating your mother and father and your spouse or your children or even yourself. Because we know at one other time when he was asked what the greatest commandment was, what did he say? To love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength. And the other is like it. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so he's not necessarily talking about having animosity or hatred towards those people that are closest to you. So what in the world could he mean? You know, I actually read one commentary that said, well, what Jesus meant was that he was talking to the 12 disciples, and he was telling them that they have to turn away from their family and everything else. And this statement is for the 12 disciples. But what does Jesus say in verse 26? If anyone would come after me, if anyone comes to me. And so he's not just talking about the disciples, he's talking about anyone in the crowd. So what in the world could he possibly mean? Well, I also want you to understand two things: the context that it was in and what it means today. The context that it was in is if you were part of the crowd and you wanted to follow Jesus and you decided to follow him and give your life to him without first getting the blessing of your family, it would be much like you were disowning or hating your family by following Jesus without first getting that blessing of family and those people most important to you. And so in that sense, Jesus is saying, anyone who's going to come after me, anyone who's going to follow me, you need to not worry about the blessing of your parents, your spouse, your children, your brother, your sister. If you are going to come after me, that needs to not matter. Some of you know that very exact dilemma in life. Maybe you came to Christ, or you are in the process of coming to Christ, and you have a husband or wife who just won't understand why you're taking that route. Maybe you have parents who will not approve of your newfound faith in Jesus Christ. Maybe you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend who will feel threatened. Maybe you have friends that you know will laugh and mock you behind your back. But here's what Jesus is saying when he says, if anyone's going to come after me, if anyone's going to follow me, he must hate his father and mother, his spouse, his children, even himself. What Jesus is saying here is this, that he wants to be your one and only. He wants to be your number one. And that's the question that we really want to look at today. Last week we looked at two questions. We said, in determining whether or not you're a fan or a follower. How do I know if I'm a fan or a follower? We looked at two questions. The first one was this. Have you made a decision about Jesus Christ, or have you made a commitment to him? That was one of the first questions that we looked at last week. And then we followed that question up with the second one. Do you know about Jesus, or do you truly know Jesus? And so the third question that we're going to look at this morning is this. Is Jesus one of many to you, or is he your one and only? Is Jesus one of many, or is he your one and only? This, folks, is a tough message, isn't it? And I'm not preaching this message to you as some preacher who has arrived and has it all together, and I'm giving you this message from my ivory tower. I am preaching this message to you today as a fellow struggler in my faith. Jesus wants to be our everything. He wants to be our everything, not just one of many. And that's what he's saying in the scripture. Unless you hate it, when people look at your love for me, unless your emotions and feelings and relationship with everyone else looks like hatred in comparison to what you feel for me, then you're not ready to follow me. Let me put it this way. In his book, Kyle Idleman, in his book, Not a Fan, he describes this scene. Kyle Idleman says, hey, suppose that you see me, and this is Kyle Idleman talking, not Jim Chandler, but Kyle Idleman says, suppose you see me in a restaurant, and I'm having a romantic dinner with a woman that's not my wife. And you confront me about it, and I say, oh, yeah, but my wife is most important. She's the most important person, even though I'm, having a date with someone else. And you decide you need to call my wife, and you need to tell her. Kyle Idleman says, now, when I get home, what do you think the reaction will be from my wife? Do you think that she'll open the door and say, honey, I hope that your date was fun. I hope you had a great time, and I'm okay with you dating other women as long as I know that I'm most important? Do you think that will be the conversation that takes place? Absolutely not. And what Jesus is saying here is this. He wants to not just be the most important person in your life. He wants to have no other competition. He doesn't just want to be first. He wants to be only. Again, in his book, he gives this illustration. He says, suppose that you put your relationship with Jesus, your relationship with your wife, your relationship with your children, your relationship with other people, and you put them all on a starting line for a race, and the gun sounds and they all take off. Do not make the mistake of thinking that you're okay because Jesus wins the race. Do not make the mistake of thinking that's okay. The reality is that race should take place, but there should be no one else on the starting line except for Jesus himself. He shouldn't have to race against anyone else. He shouldn't have to compete with anyone else. And that's really what he's saying in this scripture. If you are going to follow me, I have to be your one and only in life. No competition with other people or things. Nothing. Now, let's make that real for us today. How do you and I determine if Jesus is our one and only? Do we sell everything that we have and we go live in a cave out in the wilderness and spend all day just praying and reading the Bible? Is that how we make Jesus our one and only? I don't think that's practical or realistic at all. So how do we decide if Jesus is our one and only, as he says here in this scripture that he needs to be? Well, there's 4 questions that you and I can ask that will determine what's Jesus' level of competition in my life. What things is Jesus having to compete against in my life? And so 4 questions that we'll look at this morning to kind of determine that. The first one is this: for what do you sacrifice your money? Now I know, here we go. The preacher's going to start talking about money. But this is a question. What does Jesus have to compete with in your life? Well, one of the questions is, what do you sacrifice? For what do you sacrifice your money? Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, you can't serve 2 masters. You will either hate the one and love the other, or you'll love one and hate the other. Man cannot serve both God and money. You see, here's what happens. Fans often find ways to spend as much money as they can on the things that they love. They see things in life and they think, I really want this. Oh, it's not just even a want, I really need this. And so they rearrange their finances, they'll take out loans, they'll sell, they'll do whatever they can so that they can, in their own minds, afford these things that they want. But then when it comes to giving to the Lord, fans will grumble and complain about having to give 10%. And they'll ask, well, what do I have to give? What does the Bible require me to give? I enjoy a Thursday night Bible study in Middleburg with Ann and Frank and some others here, and we talked this last Thursday night about giving and tithes and offerings. And, it is true, there is no clear command in the New Testament that says you must give 10%. Now, there's some scriptures that kind of lead towards that kind of indicate towards that, but there's no clear command that just says, as a Christian, you must give 10%. But here's the problem. That is fan thinking. It's not follower thinking. When you and I have to think about, well, what do I have to give? What am I required to give? We are thinking like a fan, not a follower. Because, see, a fan needs a direct command so that he will fall in line and obey it and do what he has to do, what he's required to do. That's what a fan will do. Followers realize this, though. A follower realizes that 10% was a legalistic command from the Old Testament and for people who were under the law, and it was the minimum. But now that we're in the New Testament and we have something greater than the law, we have the grace of Jesus Christ, then why would I ever want to stop at 10%? And why would I want to ask, what am I required? Why would I not instead ask, what can I give? What can I change in my life so that I can give more and more to a God who has given me something greater than the law, who has given me Jesus Christ and His grace? You see, if you and I can't get past this tithing issue and give back to God a reflection of the grace that He gives us, then we're going to have a hard time going from fan to follower. The Lord has given me way more than 10%. The Lord has blessed me in so many ways. But you see, when we put ourselves in debt in a way that threatens us or makes it difficult to give tithes and offerings to the Lord, then we have just given Jesus some competition. And when we fill our lives with material things, when we find ourselves maxed out and our credit cards maxed out, and when we lay down our monthly income with our monthly expenses, and we can squeak by, we can make it without offerings and tithes, then Jesus has a lot of competition in our lives. And it's those things. And so you and I have to ask ourselves, what do we sacrifice? For what do we sacrifice our money? What kind of competition have we given Jesus in our lives when it comes to our money? And again, Jesus says, listen, unless you hate everything else, you're not going to be able to follow me. You're not going to truly be able to be a follower. How about a second question? I'll let you all breathe a sigh of relief and we'll move on from money. The second question, when you are hurt, where do you go for comfort? That's how you can know if you're a fan or a follower when it comes to your life, and what things are in your life that compete for Jesus and His comfort in your life. Again, I read this illustration. It talks about a mom is on the playground and she's talking to her child's teacher, and they're visiting and they're watching her child play on the monkey bars, and the child falls and he hurts himself, and he comes running towards the mother and the teacher. And who is he going to go to for comfort? Who is he going to look to sweep him up in their arms and take care of his hurts and his scrapes? And it's hopefully going to be the mother. And can you imagine the mother's disappointment if the little boy runs towards them, and instead of running and jumping into his mother's arms, he goes to the teacher and looks to her for the comfort? And can you imagine the emotions of the mom in that moment, and maybe the hurt and the disappointment, because she's going to be thinking, he should come to me. I'm his mother. I'm the one that has comforted him. I'm the one that's put Band-Aids on his wounds. I'm the one that has raised him and given birth to him, and he should be coming to me for comfort. But how about it in your life? When you are hurt and disappointed, when you are betrayed, when you are struggling, when you get that diagnosis that you were dreading, when you're having financial difficulty, when you're seeing struggles in your marriage, when you're having a tough time at work, where do you first go for comfort? Where do you turn? Now, folks, I don't mean that it's wrong and bad to turn to friends or family members. But again, what was Jesus' statement here? Anyone who's going to come after me must hate his father and mother, must hate his wife, must hate his children. Again, he's not talking about hate, but he's saying he needs to be our first option. And when we go through difficult things in our lives and we ask ourselves, who do I go to for comfort when I'm hurt? The answer should immediately be Jesus. Prayer ought to be our first option, not our last hope. And we ought to be turning to Him and to His Word and seeking protection and seeking healing in Him. My children knew from a young age, if they had any injury that involved blood, do not go to Dad. Do not go to Dad. Dad does not handle blood well. He can handle many other things, but not blood. We've got to ask ourselves, where do I go? where do I go when I'm hurt? And hopefully, the answer is Jesus. Because again, he wants to be our one and only. How about this thing? What disappoints you the most? That's the third question. What disappoints you the most? What things are in your life that have the power to make you angriest? That have the power to make you most disappointed? Folks, the answer to that question is very telling about your fanship or your followership. Because if something has so much power in your life that it can put you in a bad mood, that it can ruin your day, that it can just totally change your whole attitude and disposition, then maybe that thing has too much importance in your life. And Jesus is having to compete against it. What things disappoint you the most in your life? There was a day, we'll say long ago, when I would have to watch college football behind closed doors. Soundproof room, preferably, because nothing could make me angrier than my team losing. And I do remember my wife asking me at one point, do you have money on this game? Or do you know people that are playing in it? Or what's the deal? Why would you let this make you so angry? And I would tell her, because it's my team. Oh, so you have ownership in the team then. You have shared. Why would you let it make you so angry? And think about that. What things are there in life that have the power to just set you off, to make you completely angry? Is it possible that those things have too much of a role in your life? Is it possible that those things are competing with Christ for your life, your time, your energy, and emotions? And then how about this? What things excite you the most? There's the fourth question that will really help us determine what things excite you the most. What things have the power to do just the opposite, to just get you so excited and to just completely change your attitude in your life because you just get so excited about those things. We're not surprised when our children get so excited around Christmas time. We're not surprised when, they just are so hyper that they can't stand it. But, when you're a 45-year-old man and you're that excited, not talking about myself, of course, but when you're a 45-year-old man and you're that excited about something, you got to ask, what is it that makes you most excited? And again, things that excite us are not wrong, but if something has so much power in our lives that it can either disappoint us or excite us beyond measure, then maybe those things play too much of an importance in our lives. I will say this again. Jesus does not share. That sounds strange to say, that Jesus is very selfish when it comes to your relationship with him, but he does not share. He wants to be our one and only. And that's why he goes on in chapter 14 and verse 28. He says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Will he not first sit down and estimate the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? For if he lays the foundation and is not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule him, saying, this fellow began to build and was not able to finish. Jesus says, listen, if you're going to be my follower, nothing else can matter in your life next to me. I won't compete with anything else in your life. If you're going to be my follower, I have to be your one and only. And you need to know that that's going to cost you something. You need to know what that cost is, and you need to be willing ahead of time to pay it. I realized this. I realized this many, many years ago. I love my wife and children. I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good dad. I love being part of that family. But I realized this. Jesus Christ did something for me and does something for me that no one else, not a wife, not a child, can do for me what Jesus Christ has done for me. And it doesn't mean that I don't love them, but it means that my love for him is so great because of what he has sacrificed, what he has given me, what he has done for me. And I know these sound like harsh and difficult words, but it's very true in what Jesus is saying. He will not compete in your life against family members. He won't play second string to Disney World. He won't sit on the bench while we focus on our kids and their sports. He won't sit at the kids' table with a potato salad while we spend our time picnicking with others rather than fellowshipping with him. Jesus will not ride shotgun while we travel and send postcards back to our church family because we've decided that being with them and worshiping with them is not as important as seeing God's great landscape as we travel, and that's just as valid as being in church. Jesus won't wait for every other weekend like a kid in a shared custody situation. He says, if you want to be my disciple, if you want to be a follower, if you want to be more than a fan, then I have to be your one and only. And it will cost you. So you really need to know the cost and pay it before you ever start down that road. You see, what I realize, guys, is this. It is time for you and I to stop asking, what is the minimum that I have to give to the Lord in my money, in my time, in my finances, in my relationships, in my talents and skills, in my life. It's time to stop asking, what's the minimum, and start asking, how can I change my life to make sure that Jesus Christ is my one and only? Because here's the realization. Someday, what you've done in this life, the accomplishments that you've achieved, they're not going to matter. Someday, the pictures of your grandkids on Facebook, they're not going to matter. Someday, the number of years and the different anniversaries that you've celebrated in marriage, they're not going to matter. Someday, the title and the desk and the little placard that was on your desk, it's not going to matter. Someday, the number of points that your children have scored and their batting averages and their free throw shooting percentages and none of those things are going to matter. Someday, the only thing that's going to matter is this question: are you a fan or a follower? And that's going to be the only thing that matters. Now, folks, let me just say this again, because I don't want you to walk out of here and misunderstand me. Spouses are not evil. Mine's not evil. I love my wife. And marriage is great. It's a gift from God. Family is wonderful. Vacationing is wonderful. God has blessed us with so many things that can bring pleasure and joy into our lives. It's not evil. But will we allow them, or will we make Jesus compete with those things for our life? Will we make Jesus compete with those things that he intends to bring us joy? Will we make him compete with those things? I realized even as I was getting dressed this morning, man, how foolish is it that you and I pray and expect God to bless areas of our lives that we are making him compete with? Is he going to do that? Is he going to bless an area of our life that is just taking us farther away from him? You see, again, he wants to be our one and only. Jesus said, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full, have it more abundantly. He wants to give us great and wonderful things, but he never wants to compete against those things that he gives us. And so, again, today, it doesn't matter, your neighborhood, it doesn't matter your possessions, it doesn't matter your job title, it doesn't matter your bank account, it doesn't matter how many people you have in your family. The only thing that matters right now, right here today, is this question that Jesus posed to the crowd and the statement he made to them. Are you going to be my follower, or are you just going to be a fan? Because if you're going to be my follower, then I have to be it for your life. I have to be your one and only. Your complete commitment and allegiance has to be for me. There's no middle ground. It has to be all or nothing for Jesus. How do you answer that today? You can walk out here today and you can say, I'm enjoying being a fan. I will stay a fan. And you can do that. You have the free will to do that. But just know this. We started this series with a statement that Jesus made, that on that day there are going to be many who say, Lord, Lord, I prophesied in your name, I'm yours. And Jesus is going to say, I'm sorry, but I never knew you. Heaven is not for fans. Heaven is for followers who have been transformed by the grace of God and the saving power of Jesus Christ in their lives. And that's my prayer for us, that that's what we would be. He deserves our everything. He deserves all we have. Today we're going to stand and we're going to sing a song of decision.